go, Jim. He's dead.
I'm Stephen Cadwell. Hello and welcome to Improv Autopsy. This is part one of my interview with musical director Alex Engleberg. I met Alex at Ocean State Improv Festival in 2025, and if I wasn't able to tell how amazing he was by watching him accompany Phil Guerin in Grandpa Phil Does a Bedtime Musical, it would have been evident from the sheer number of people asking him to be on keys for their show as well. Alex is an amazing musician and a fantastic musical improviser. I especially enjoyed interviewing Alex as I had interviewed another incredible music director, John Hilson, not too long before. It was fascinating to hear the similarities and differences in how these two musicians approach their art and apply it to improvisational theater. Alex is very playful as an MD and he truly enjoys what he's doing. As someone who is usually anxious when asked to sing on stage, I know the power of having a great MD there with you. If Alex is your MD, you know you are supported and can feel that the moment he starts to play. He doesn't demand you meet him anywhere, but rather listens and responds. He says yes to wherever you are, whatever type of singer you may be, whatever scene is happening on stage, and he complements that, enhances it, highlights it, or plays with it like all the best improvisers do. Alex's presence is more felt than seen, but his effect, as that of any great MD, is undeniable. Alex had a lot going on this year at OSIF, and I didn't get a chance to connect with him as much as I would have liked. He's a highly coveted addition to any show. If you don't believe me, bring him to where you are and have him MD an evening. I have a short list of MDs I'd improvise with at the drop of a hat, and Alex has been on it since the first moments I heard him MD a show. Enough of me. Please enjoy part one of Alex Engleberg's Improv Autopsy. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Are we going to see you at OSIF this year?
That's the plan. Yeah, I'm returning. I had such a good time last year.
Oh, good. Were you there with anyone last year, or were you just there?
Last year, I went with Grandpa Phil Tells a Bedtime Musical.
Great.
But when people found out that I was there and I was down to play music for people, I kind of ended up getting roped into a lot of other stuff. So it felt like I was just doing all of the stuff.
Yeah.
But that was my original intended purpose. And we had a really good time.
Good. So Grandpa Phil's going back as well?
Yeah.
So I may have asked you this at the festival, and if so, I'm sorry I've forgotten, but do you improvise on stage as well, or do you stick mostly to music?
Not really. I almost never do improv on stage. I'm all about the music side.
Okay, so music director pretty much only.
Yeah, pretty much. I've definitely tried some onstage improv. I took a couple of improv classes after I started working on improv shows as a musician because I just kind of wanted to see what it was like. And it was really fun. But I think a mixture of like my body does not feel supernatural, like acting and like being on stage and being perceived. I just like feel like I'm standing weird and walking around weird. And so I just need to get better at acting. And then also like just being afraid of being bad at things because I'm really good at music and I'm bad at acting and improv. And so being afraid of doing things in front of people that I'm bad at has made me afraid to do more improv.
That's a shame. My first encounter with improv was as theater, but it was one of those things as well. A lot of viola spolin, I think, exercises were a part of that class and that kind of thing. But it is something that definitely makes you more aware of how you carry yourself and how you are in the world. So
yeah.
It hopefully also makes that matter less. But yeah, that is a interesting interplay of stuff. Before we get too far into that, though, I want to go back. Let's go back to the beginning. Alex, how did you get into music? When did that become part of your life and part of who you are?
Oh, yeah. So I've been playing music pretty much my whole life. I took piano lessons very young. I started when I was like 3 and just playing little things, and worked with a piano teacher for a lot of my childhood, mostly playing like classical piano type stuff. And I grew up in a musical family, and so we were interested in different musical genres and singing and harmonizing and playing instruments and listening to different kinds of music. And so I was exposed to a lot of music, and I had opportunities to play music. I was also homeschooled, which sort of helped me focus on the stuff that I was really obsessed with. So I took piano for a long time. And then as a teenager, I was more interested in rock music. So I started playing drums, took drums for a while. And I studied at the School of Rock as a teenager, where I played some drums and guitar alongside other kids who were interested in rock music, which was a really fun experience. And that's also how I got practice, like learning how to cover existing songs, which was really fun. And when I was in School of Rock, when I was around these other kids who were very silly and liked music, I feel like there were times where we would kind of goof off in the practice room, just kind of making stuff up. And that made me kind of realize that while music is great, I think just like using musical skills to kind of be silly and bounce off of each other is like even better. And so I think that may have planted a seed early that maybe I would enjoy working in the comedy world in the musical capacity.
Yeah. So yeah, I was going to ask about, because I see the kit behind you.
Yes. In this room here where I'm recording, I have a drum kit behind me. This is kind of like my both like computer room and like music making room.
Do you play anything else other than guitar, you said?
Yes.
Drums, piano, anything else?
Yeah, I think that that drums and piano are kind of my most sharpened instruments, and I've learned a fair bit of like rhythm guitar, so I may not be able to wail a solo pretty well, but I can play chords, which is good enough for a lot of improv situations.
Yeah.
There are other instruments that are like kind of branching out from those that are like weren't a super large hop away, but I was able to kind of use. So like bass is like very similar to guitar. Ukulele is kind of similar to guitar. I learned accordion for a bit because there was a show that I was in that the director was like, what, like, it would be really cool if you could play the accordion. And I was like, I could like just see how long it would take to learn. And it took a bit, and I'm still like, decidedly medium quality at that instrument, but it worked for the show and it was very silly. And then also sort of as a weird side fact about me is that I learned to play the recorder as a kid, but I took like a year of like private lessons with a recorder player because I was homeschooled and we had a recorder lying around the house, and my dad, who would sort of homeschool me and like sign me up for classes and stuff, he would kind of just like listen to like what I seemed to be kind of fixating on and then just being like, hey, do you want to just like take an actual class about that? And so I was just kind of playing around with like a plastic recorder that was in the house. And I think that eventually led to like, okay, you're now signed up for recorder lessons for real. And so I learned like classical recorder pieces from the Baroque period written by actual composers. And so that was a fun, weird thing I did. And then now sometimes in shows, I'll just like whip out a recorder, which is great.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's not just Three Blind Mice that you'll play.
Correct. Yeah. I know a few more notes than that.
That's great. Yeah, that's it seems like an instrument that is just for kids, but it's been around a long time and it has pieces of music written for it. It's just not something people commonly think of in that way.
Yeah, I heard, and this is like big citation needed on this one, but I heard that recorder got more widely adopted as sort of like in schools for kids, partly because it can help you kind of regulate your breathing. And so if you're like at risk for like asthma or something, then like having an instrument that makes you breathe in a certain way can be good to do early. That's what I heard is like why that ended up being like the go-to for schools and stuff.
It works until you become a parent and your kid starts playing recorder, and then that ruins your breathing because you're trying to
you're exasperated listening to it. Yeah, totally.
Does that thing that you played last year that had the pipe that you were blowing into and the little keyboard, does that have a name?
Oh yeah, the melodica.
Okay,
is an instrument, and that's like basically just a piano that you can blow into, kind of like a harmonica. So it's something that a lot of keyboard players enjoy having one of those lying around because it kind of lets them have a very different sound, but using the exact same skills that they already have.
Yeah, it's like a for real mouth organ, right? Like a pump organ, but you're blowing into it, and it's littler.
Pretty much.
Yeah, it is. It's a very interesting, fun sound when you'd pull that out.
Yeah, it's fun for certain styles if you want to sound like have a sort of harmonica or accordion-y sound, but with not a lot of money investment or skill investment.
New skill investment.
New skill investment. Yeah.
Because I don't have much skill and I could not play one.
Mm.
So when did the theatrical type of improv enter the scene for you? When did that first become a part of your awareness? And then when did you first sort of plug in and start using your talents there?
I had seen Whose Line as a kid and I loved it. My family would watch Whose Line together, and it was always like, I could tell early that like watching improv was really fun for my brain. I was kind of obsessed with watching it. And to this day, I will just like my TikTok feed is a lot of just like clips from Who's Line. And so, I never got away from that. But I kind of didn't, it didn't necessarily occur to me like to go find other improv to watch. Like I was just like, okay, Whose Line's great. Love watching that. Improv's great. But I hadn't really had the like conscious thought of like, okay, like maybe there's other improv theaters out there that I can watch. I had sort of an inkling because Whose Line did their tour called Who's Live, where they were doing big theaters, and I saw one in Seattle with my family, and I was like, well, that's cool. And they had a different accompanist for that, and he was great. And they were doing stuff, and feeling it in the live audience was like, wow, this is awesome. And I kind of started to have the thought that like, oh, it would be kind of cool if like I could be like the guy on the keys. Like, I wonder if that's like, that would be a cool job for me someday. But I still didn't have the exact thought of like going to find local improv and watching it. I think part of it is because Whose Line is like pretty family friendly for the most part. Like, it's very widely like, you can just kind of like, as a kid, you can kind of tell what's going on. And I think that like a lot of local improv shows, they're not necessarily R-rated, but I think that they might be default a little to like what an adult finds funny.
Yeah.
And so I did do a field trip where I saw a local improv show in Seattle as a younger kid, but maybe it didn't click for me because of that as like something that I wanted to come back to. But later, when I was like 18, I heard that Unexpected Productions, which is a theater in Seattle that does improv, that a friend of mine named Colin, who was a company member there, I was friends with him, and he knew that I was a musician. And I think he mentioned that they were looking for more musicians to do certain like long form shows and short form shows. And I think just hearing that, and like we sat down for coffee, and he was like, yeah, so there's like this improv theater, and like here's how musicians participate. Then it kind of started to click for me. I'm like, oh wow, I'm actually getting really excited thinking about like maybe just going to watch their shows and talking about like maybe being a musician there, because it made me realize that was something that was wanted. And so I went to check out my first show at Unexpected Productions. It was sort of a long form kind of montage show called Seattle Secrets. And I sent an email being like, hey, I'm like a potentially new musician that wants to kind of like see what this is all about and chat with like the musician that's already there. And I want to just kind of watch and learn. And I showed up, and I was like, hey, nice to meet you. Like, I'm excited to watch you play. And he was like, do you want to just like play now? Like, do you want to just like jump in? Because he played guitar and I played piano. So he was like, you can just jump on the piano right now and I'll play. I was like, okay. And it went fine. I was like really nervous, so I kind of didn't really play that much. Like, I would just sometimes play really softly, but I never like made any offers. I was just kind of following what Nick did on the guitar. And like I was nervous, but I was like, wow, I could already feel that it was fun. And also everyone was really happy that I was there. Like, before I even did anything, before I even showed any sort of like skill or like what I would do, just the cast backstage, upon hearing like, hey, we have a musician that's joining us, they were just like, yay, thank you so much. Like, before they had heard me play at all, they were already like super bought in. And that sort of emotional validation and approval made me like, oh, like I'm very welcome here. And that was really cool. Which I guess goes to show how in demand musicians are in the improv world, because that was kind of the sentiment.
Absolutely. And highly valued. Are you still connected then to
Unexpected Productions? I'm still a company member there. I perform there very regularly, mostly doing their flagship short form show, which is Seattle Theater Sports.
Okay. And do you play at other theaters in town as well, or pretty much just Unexpected?
Yeah, it's definitely expanded. So there's at least 4 kind of major improv theaters in Seattle, and I've gotten to work with all of them a little bit here and there.
Oh, awesome.
And for the most part, I do stuff with Unexpected Productions and Jet City Improv. And Jet City Improv they do a little more kind of genre improv, kind of based on existing genres in media, but Unexpected does tons of that too. So essentially, when either theater is working on some kind of long form show that is musical in nature, I usually end up getting roped in, and it's a blast.
Yeah, it sounds like they really have to twist your arm, Alex.
Yeah, no, I'm super down.
When I was coming up through SAC in Florida, they had student groups at the time. They should again, but they don't yet. They had student groups. The first student group was Lab Rats, and then you could move from there into what they called Gen S and became Next Gen at some point.
Mhm.
And then you could possibly apprentice. And one of our complaints in those student groups is always, you have so much music on the weekend, but you never give us any music in the Lab Rats or in Gen S.
Mm.
And how are we supposed to practice all the stuff that you do? But they paid their musicians, and they didn't want to pay a musician to be
Yeah.
at both the workshop for the student group and then also the student show, because it's just an added cost for a show that didn't make money anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, we always really wanted a musician to be there, and occasionally someone would volunteer, or someone that was coming up through the ranks would be like, "Hey, I know how to play, so I'll do it." So for the short form show, what do you typically end up doing most for that show?
Basically, in our theater sports show, musicians are invited to underscore anything. So any scene, ideally, they want to have a bit of background music. And, without overplaying or over asserting yourself, I guess, as an offer in the scene, like any underscoring cue can really help people and they get really excited about having that. So I try to provide some underscoring to help shape the emotion of like most of the scenes. And then it kind of depends on like which musician is there and like what that musician might be comfortable with. But when I'm there, they'll usually make a point of doing 1 to 3 like musical games in the show. The most common ones are they get a story from the audience that is either about an actual scar on their body, the backstory behind that, or they get a relationship, like a real couple in the audience, and say like, "How did you meet?" and then tell that story. Those are kind of the 2 most common ones, and then they'll retell that as either a Broadway musical or an opera, or they might set it up as a rock opera. So they'll do that, and then I'll be playing musical numbers for their kind of musical, kind of helping try to tell like the fastest musical ever, because it needs to be about 5 to 10 minutes for the short form scene. And then there are other musical games that are a lot more gamey. So there's a game called Blues Bar that they'll play a lot, where they'll say like, all right, it's essentially just a scene where they sing 3 songs that are in the blues style, but they'll set it up as like people hanging out in the bar, and they'll be like, yeah, well, I've had a bad day. Oh, tell us about your bad day. Well, and then audience, what has made my day bad? And then they sing the song about that. And so they'll get 3 of those. And so that's fun. Then they have other games where the music is kind of like a gamey element in the scene. So they'll be like, there's one called Piano Torture, where it's like the music is encouraged to kind of cut in and out very suddenly, and then they have to sing exactly when the music is there, and that's a very silly game. So that gets called a lot. So that's kind of the range of stuff. And then the other stuff that will need some specialized knowledge from me potentially is like Unexpected really loves to do their cinematic and theatrical genres. So they'll call like, we're going to do this scene in the style of Tennessee Williams, or we're going to do the scene in the style of a sitcom or an action movie or something. And so I'm invited to rack my brain and think of like, what does that sound like? And then give some kind of appropriate underscoring that gets people in that space, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So just touching on a couple games, and then I want to explore more of what you said. But so for the one in the bar, does the bartender sing back? It's not that version of Bartender. It's just there 3 people singing their problems.
It's usually like one of them is endowed as the bartender,
Okay.
but then the bartender will also get their own song at the end or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
We were doing a rewatch of Who's Line, and there is a game that we know, or we would play, called Bartender, but you'd sing your problem to the bartender. Bartender sings a solution to the problem.
Oh, that's fun.
And then that would go through potentially all 3 people, or maybe just 2 people. And then we one of the other biggies for us was song cue, which is where just at any point in the scene, someone on the other team on the microphone say, "Freeze, that sounds like a song," and then repeat whatever the last line you said.
Yeah, we play that exact game. We just call it Sounds Like a Song.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So that was a big one for us. So before we get to accompanying people that are singing, if they throw out a Tennessee Williams, like, what's your thought process there? What do you have a go-to for those types of genres, or how do you wrap your mind around those?
Yeah, Tennessee Williams actually was a hard one for me, because I personally have never seen one of Tennessee Williams's plays or movies based on the plays. I know that they exist, and I know what they are, and I know that there are movies, so I really should just go watch them. And that's what I usually do, is I eventually try to find time to just watch a movie in a genre just so I can kind of hear it. sometimes people will tell me like, well, Tennessee Williams is like very like jazzy, very sultry, and just like do something with that. And I'll be like, okay, cool, I'll take that. Like I'll do jazzy sultry. So that's kind of what I do for that. But eventually I'll update my understanding of that genre, and then it'll be better. So for cinematic or TV genres, I'll kind of just think like, well, if I were watching this on my TV, like what would I be hearing? Like what would be the instrument or the melody kind of area that people tend to go when composing for these. Also, like the quantity of the music kind of matters, where it's like some movie genres, there's a lot of underscoring, and then some movie genres, it's like kind of a really dramatic, like just conversation with no music at all. So like just trying to key into like trying to do something that makes me feel like I would feel if I were just watching it. And that's mostly it. If I notice that that a genre is coming up a lot, and if I don't feel like I'm necessarily like nailing it, then I'll go watch or find like the most famous example of the thing and kind of listen to some musical examples and try to pick out some idea from the patterns that I'm hearing in that. When I'm doing musical genres, I want to get the audience to think like, oh yeah, like that's what that sounds like. He's nailing that. And that can be accomplished in a couple ways. Like sometimes it's like you're in film noir. So I feel like if you're in film noir, then I'll think like, oh, maybe I'll like try to put like a little saxophone melody in there, because then people will hear that and be like, ah, yeah, saxophone. That's so film noir. Something like that. Or potentially maybe there's like one song that people think of. So like if someone calls like spaghetti western, then like there's like one spaghetti western that everyone knows, which is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, I think.
Yeah.
And then it's like there's one song from that everyone knows, where it's like where like the whistling and the like
Yep.
And so I'm just like, okay, well maybe I can call to that, and then people will be like, ah, yeah, I was expecting that. That feels right.
Yeah.
So kind of giving them that reaction of like, yeah, I expected to hear that and I heard it is good. But with that, I try not to be like, for some reason, I don't know why I do this, but sometimes I feel like if I'm quoting an exact song, like if I do it once and people laugh, then I feel like a genius. And then if I do that a bunch of times across many shows, then I feel like it's like a hack for some reason. And so sometimes if I catch myself doing a pattern, then I'll like talk myself out of it, which maybe isn't good for the show. But yeah, I'll try to vary it up, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Some friends of mine and I feel the same way about improv itself. Like an opportunity would arise either at another show or in another venue, and it's like I did this thing last time in a similar situation. I know it's going to kill, but we tried not to do those things because we wanted it to be spontaneous and new. So yeah, I only imagine it's even harder as a musician, because there are only so many spaghetti western songs that people are going to recognize.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. How often do you find yourself using an actual piano patch versus another patch? And do you have a favorite patch?
I would say it kind of depends on the gear that I'm using. Like at Unexpected Productions, they just have a keyboard. They have actually multiple keyboards that live there in the pit. And so I'm very fortunate that I get to just like show up, boot it all up, and then like play all these different keyboards. And I also, I love to really get in the weeds on like making sure I know every setting on the keyboard that I use, just so I know what's there. So both like the patches and the like actual features of the keyboard, just so I kind of know like, okay, if I hit this button, then it'll play like a beat, and then I'll like, if I hit this button, then it'll like switch over to another like style or something. So just kind of knowing what it does. And so I've been known to like go read the manual of all the keyboards that I use on stage, and that's been nice. But I would say I think I used to be more like trying to use as many different kinds of sounds as possible, because it felt like an easy way of getting people to think in a certain style, being like, oh yeah, here's the flute because we're doing this kind of like Renaissance thing, or here's the horns for this. But I like the simplicity of piano. Like I also realize that if an audience is only hearing piano, they can kind of suspend their disbelief a little more when you do some kind of other genre using the piano sound. So if I can appreciate that both are good, and so I'll kind of bounce around a little bit between those two mindsets. But overall, I would say at Unexpected, I'm jumping around a lot between settings because I kind of know what's there and I know what to do. If I'm playing on another keyboard, I might stick to piano just kind of for safety, and I kind of know how to play other stuff with a piano. And then when I use like my own gigging keyboard at different kinds of events and stuff, it might be a mix. For long form musical improv, like long form Broadway musical improv, I'm pretty much all 100% piano, mostly because it's sort of like culturally more normal, I think, to have one accompanist playing one piano in like a musical, because that is one tier of budget that a musical can be. And it can sound really good and it's great. And so I kind of like to sort of like emulating that, I think can add a lot of authenticity, where if it's kind of like, well, if I'm playing like a string patch, then people might listen to that and be like, wow, I'm like really aware of how there's like only one musician right now. Whereas if I'm only playing piano and I'm kind of using all the range of the piano, then people will be like, yeah, like I'm listening to like a musical right now. I don't know. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Is there a difference, or do you approach it differently, accompanying someone for singing versus underscoring? What's the difference between those for you?
I think that in underscoring, the improvisers are way more confident and in control. And so I can kind of let them like I can follow them for the most part. And then I think with singing, the improvisers are relying on me a lot. Like they need some kind of like structure to kind of feel like they know what to do. And so I will assert myself way more as like, here's the rhythm, here's the chords, like, and I'll kind of try to control them more and be like, okay, I'm kind of steer you into this chord or this section, or I'll try to see, kind of read their mind and see like what they might want but maybe haven't thought of yet, and be like, okay, like you maybe need this song to be over now, and so I'm going to kind of like steer it to like kind of slow down and end the song for you so that you don't have to like think of more stuff. Stuff like that. So I think I'm way more keyed in and trying to kind of like, I'm like kind of the road underneath them. Whereas like if I'm underscoring, I actually feel like they're the road and then I'm like just adding offers on top of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the difference playing with Phil, whom you know rather well, versus playing
Mhm.
with someone maybe that you have never met, but you're still the MD for their show? And so Phil obviously sings a lot. So what's the difference playing for Phil when Phil's singing versus playing for someone that you've never played for before when they're singing?
Yeah, I think once I get to know a specific improviser, then I definitely can make different choices. Because, like, if you can kind of feel in your bones, like, what they're going to do
Yeah.
in a couple seconds from now, then you can, like, make a choice that, like, has a higher probability of, like, matching their choice, which can be really cool. I think with Phil, we trust each other a lot. And so I think I play definitely pretty differently. And Phil really likes to, I think he's a little bit like more stream of consciousness in the sense of like, he doesn't like song structure in the traditional sense as much, where like a lot of musical improvisers, they're trained to be like, you have to do like a verse and then a chorus and then another verse and then definitely come back to that chorus again, and then like the chorus is a specific length and stuff like that. And I think Phil rightfully realizes that you will use a lot of time to kind of repeating yourself in like a traditional song structure, but it requires a lot of trust, and it requires an accompanist who can kind of like follow you from like one thought to the next thought and justify it musically. And I think I've been able to do that with him well enough that he feels really comfortable just kind of like jumping from one idea to the next, even if it like kind of interrupts the song that's currently happening, because I can kind of like fade between the two thoughts in a seamless way. So a lot of my shows with Phil, where it's just us, end up being very like moment to moment to moment, very rapid, like cutting between things, and it feels planned, even though it's not.
That reminded me of something that Kayla and I were talking the other day, and one of the things that she was her favorite moments from last year's Ocean State was, I think it was Maestro, she said,
Mm.
and you were underscoring for, and it was I forget what the game was they were playing, or maybe it was radio stations. People had different radio stations,
Hmm.
and the call was made for two radio stations at once. And I think we both looked at you because you'd been underscoring, and we saw you kind of think a minute and then start playing both of those things. The combination of what does this plus this equal, and then you started playing that, which was an approximation then of what both of those radio stations had been up
Wow.
until then, and that was just so delightful to watch that happen, and then to hear the result, of that. I mean, it was such a great choice to make, and you executed it so well.
I really appreciate that. I mean, I feel like the comedy moment of that can't even really be attributed to me because it was someone else kind of made the choice to like blend those two together and then like give me that challenge. And so I'm always really grateful when people do that. And like even if it doesn't work, it's just like really fun to watch.
Yeah. So where are you on the theory spectrum in
Mm,
terms of where is that in your consciousness as you're playing? And are you someone who can and enjoys playing by ear? If you get a request for a pop song or a song that's in the Zeitgeist, is that something you enjoy
yeah.
trying to quote, as you said, or would you rather not do that?
Let's see. So the first question on music theory, people talk a lot about music theory and like how important it is in like different types of music and like are you overdoing it if you're trying to like break down the music you hear with like different music theory terms and like talk. But I think and some musicians get in their head about like I don't know enough music theory, therefore I can't do X or something. Like the way I like think about it is I think music theory is it's a language that musicians can use to describe like cool stuff that they hear. So it's like it basically it lets you give a name to something cool is basically the whole point of theory. So if you hear a cool chord, like you don't have to describe that chord. Like you can just be like, I'm also going to play that chord. Here's that chord again. But if you can give it a name, then it kind of helps you like remember it, and it helps you remember that it exists and you can use it. So if you're like, I'm playing a major 7 sharp 9 or whatever, then it's like you can kind of remember like, well, there was this one thing that I heard in a major 7 sharp 9 and that was cool. And maybe if I want to get people in that space, I could try to use that chord again. But you don't have to do any of that. Like, and when I'm actually on stage, actually playing, I'm never consciously thinking of the music theory language for the choices I make. I think it's a lot of just intuitive, like vibes based, where I'm like, something in my mind is compelling me that this, like, I kind of think in terms of like finger shapes, where it's like my fingers feel like they need to be in this shape, which happens to be a certain kind of chord. And then, like, if you asked me, then I could think and be like, that was a minor 7 chord that I just did. But it's not like I'm not thinking like, yeah, minor 7, there it is.
So what about even just keys?
Yeah.
Because earlier you talked about how when you see, especially maybe some of the genres on stage, part of your thought process is, if I were watching this on TV or on film, how would I be feeling? And then you're trying to emulate that or
Mhm.
provoke that with whatever you're playing.
Totally.
Does theory work itself in your brain in any of that at all? Or is it just like you were just saying now, I think more you just intuiting?
I think when I'm first trying to figure out a genre, then I'll analyze source material, and then I can maybe use some music theory to kind of extract some ideas. So maybe I'll listen and be like, wow, in like a heist or a mystery, people really like using like a minor major 7, which is like kind of the mysterious chord where it's like ba 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 bum, like secret agent music. And so I can consciously be like, okay, that's a chord that comes up. And then maybe in shows, I'll remember that and being like, okay, I'm going to play that minor major 7 real quick, and then that feels good, and it'll start to keep happening, and then eventually it kind of just becomes a muscle memory, and I stop remembering the name of the chord, and it just kind of my fingers just start kind of doing it. So that's kind of the progression. It's like I start with sort of a theory understanding and then it kind of starts becoming more of a muscle memory as I like put it into practice.
Cool. And so I guess the second question in my little monologue a while ago was about, do you play by ear? Is that something you enjoy, or do you hate that being asked, hey, play Peanuts?
Totally. I love playing stuff by ear, and I'm super down. I think some of the memorable show moments that some people will like tell me about are like have something to do with like a real song coming into play, and like me just happening to know that song came in handy. So I really love it. I think I have a pretty good ear, and I've been listening to music for a while, and I think I've gotten to the point where like if I've heard a song a few times, if I know a song well enough that I could like sing it to you, then I could probably also play it on the piano. Like I could kind of figure out either what chords the song used just kind of by like remembering how I've heard the song on the radio in the past, or even just kind of like arranging chords to kind of fit the vibe. Like sometimes I feel like if someone's like play Piano Man, then I'll probably be like, I'm pretty sure I know what chords Piano Man uses, and I'll play it. And then maybe I might be a little off. Like sometimes I've done that. I've played something by ear and it works for the moment, and then I'll like listen to the real song later and realize like, oh wait, I for some reason like did not catch that they used this different chord in this one moment, and then I just kind of invented a replacement chord that felt like it would work, but no one cared, no one noticed, so it
Yeah.
worked. So that happens kind of a lot where there's some like there's some information loss in my own learning process, but I end up getting like 80% of the right. Like I end up extracting the necessary information for other people to sing to it, and so it works out.
Do you have go-tos for do you do like an in the studio at all in the short form stuff?
Uh, that actually never comes up, but because I know Sarah Hanchar, who worked at SAC, I've seen her play that game specifically, and I've played that with her. But it's not like a mainstay in our theater sports rotation. But it's a really fun one. Is that when it's like you get a song and then you do it again in 3 musical styles?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I didn't know what the call for was, other than maybe scenic genres, if there was a call for, because those are specifically musical genres, like Western, jazz, or whatever. And if you had go to
Totally.
songs that you'd play for that, or if you just wing it each time, but if it's not something that happens a lot.
Yeah. So are you asking like go-to songs for certain like film genres?
Yeah,
Or
sure.
yeah, totally. Sometimes I think like Mission Impossible comes up a lot. If people want to do some spy thing, then like sure, like let's throw some Mission Impossible in there. If people are having kind of a flirtatious moment, let's throw Careless Whisper in there. I don't know, why not? Or I think I do some cinematic. I'm really into like kind of 80s Hollywood movie soundtracks. So like anything by John Williams and like Back to the Future, I love. Like I just really unironically love all those soundtracks. So like if I have an excuse to bring it in, I will. If it's like, oh, this would be funny if I played Jurassic Park right here, then I'll totally do it.
What's the interplay with you and as an MD and the tech then? Is pretty much all the
hmm
music coming from you, or do you share that responsibility?
Well, the way theater sports does it is they always have 3 people in the booth, which is incredible. They have lights and sound and like someone on the projector doing like scores and fun graphics. And so the sound person and I kind of have to kind of negotiate a little bit. And usually what happens is that the sound person is doing like bump music, which is like when a scene ends, just get like blacking out and like playing some music to kind of transition us out of that. That'll be them. Certain cues like, please welcome our teams, come on down. And then they'll play something. Basically any moment where you kind of need like loud music to get people pumped up, then they'll play that. Whereas if it's like we're in the scene, we're kind of like focused, we're doing improv, then I'll play for that. So in the scene, I'm playing. Outside of the scene, just like in the meta structure of the show, then the booth will play. I've done it both ways though. Like I have done shows where there was not a sound person or we talked about it and they had me just do all the music for everything. And that can be really fun too. There's something actually fun about doing the kind of like meta music cues because it makes me feel like I'm on like a late night talk show band. Like when like the Roots on Jimmy Fallon. Like
Yeah, yeah.
I love feeling like that. And that is especially fun when there's maybe multiple band members and we're playing as a band. Maybe there's a drummer because you want a little extra energy because the audience is usually cheering like at the moment that music is playing. So you want a little extra energy in it. So when you have a band and you can do that, I think that can be great.
I was asking that, or was curious about that, because I know, like, again, my biggest frame of reference at SAC would be like if there's a Jurassic Park, I think it's most likely coming from the tech, but it might be the same sort of thing that you're talking about, where the tech is doing more of the bumpers and the after the scene,
Mm-hmm.
versus during the scene is probably the same way that it is there.
Yeah.
So if the 007 bass riff is happening during a scene, it's probably coming from you.
Yeah, sound mostly does in between scenes, but they'll also do fun, cheeky references that I love where they'll pull up like if there is some kind of like the scene takes place at a bank, then maybe the scene ender music for that would be like Money by Pink Floyd or something. And I love hearing that and be like, nice. And I'm in the pit and I'm in the pit kind of toward the stage and I can't make eye contact with the sound person without like physically turning all the way around and like looking and calling a lot of attention to myself. So I usually don't actually look at the tech, but then I'll just like silently be like, yeah, they're nailing it.
So from that first experience there, when you went, you were pretty much absorbed into the group and became a part of Unexpected Productions, right?
Yes, and I was pretty obsessed. I was like doing a lot of shows. I would like every weekend I would come down and do a short form show, and I would work on their long form shows and do their style shows. There was a time when they were regularly doing 3 shows a night in the weekend primetime nights. And so I would sometimes come in and do all 3 shows back to back on the keys. And internally, we would call that a Vegas night. But now Vegas nights are back because in the last year or so, we've actually started doing 3 show nights again. Gradually, we got to there after the pandemic. We gradually started adding more stuff. Now we're back to that point.
Oh, that's great.
Now I don't think I could. I don't know. I simply don't have the energy to do more than like maybe one. Like I can maybe do 2 shows back to back in a night, but I wouldn't do 3.
You're just spreading it around. You're letting other people have a little
Exactly.
bit of a game.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to get rid of the nerves that you had that first time around, or was the first time enough of a core memory that you were after that you were like, I'm fine with this. This is good.
I think it only took maybe a few shows and a few theater sports specifically for me to feel comfortable making what I call like reactive offers. So if it's like, okay, they're clearly doing a scene that clearly calls for some style, I could pull it out. So I started to kind of learn what those reactive musical offers were that came up the most, and I could pull those out very readily. I think it took me a few years, though, of doing not just that show, but other kinds of shows, especially long form shows, for me to make what I call proactive offers, where it's like I'm actually making a somewhat bold choice that they is sort of trying to influence them. So it took me kind of a long time to feel confident enough. Like I had seen enough shows that I was sort of confident in making like essentially like judgment calls about what the scene should be about from where I was sitting. Well, I learned from taking improv classes that it's super hard being on stage and being able to see your own scene from the outside. And so that made me empathize with the improvisers that I play with, where I'm like, well, maybe like they might not see certain things. And like sometimes they physically cannot see like people walking in, and like they can't see like what's about to happen. So like I can actually use that to my advantage if I'm like, I actually like know better than you maybe what this scene is about, then I can like play something. But that took me many years to be like actually feel confident, like here's my offer, take it or leave it. Like here's a thing that I would like you to react to, please. That would be something like in long form musicals, it's on me a lot to like start songs. So it's like people will be talking and I'll be like, I'm essentially playing sounds like a song with myself, or I'm being like, that sounds like a song. Here's the song. So being confident enough to jump in with that, or potentially like in short form shows too, like a regular scene, but maybe like I can feel that they're getting to maybe kind of an emotional climax or a like kind of an emotional turning point where the character is like starting to feel emotional about what is happening. Then I can, when it's that character's turn to talk, I might play a musical cue that sounds like a different emotion that will make them start thinking like, yeah, maybe it's not all bad. Like and then like from what I had seen in that scene so far, I could feel like I think that the next thing that should happen here to kind of give it like a beginning, middle, and end is for some kind of emotional turn. But that took me so long to even kind of start to feel that way when I was watching scenes. For a while, it was all reactive. I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just kind of like, it would just, people would be already doing something with a certain emotion. And I'd be like, okay, I'm just kind of trying to justify that, which I still do. I try to do that as best as I can. So does that make sense? It was kind of like some things I got confident about pretty quickly. And then some things it took me a long time because it required a lot more holistic awareness of the improv.
Yeah. When you're watching, what are the indications to you that they need that prod versus you just need to highlight what they're doing?
It's mostly just like if I have an idea and they have the same idea, then I'm like, well, I don't need to do anything. You're doing it already. Or if they seem to have a really strong idea, then I'm like, let's follow your idea. And then if it's like, I feel like people are just maybe floundering and not having a strong idea, and I happen to have an idea, then I'll be like, well, here I'm because that's what improv is all about. It's like you're just giving each other gifts, right? And so like, if I feel like what I have is maybe a gift, then I'll be like, here, let's see if that's a gift.
So when I talked with Charlie Downs, who's one of the best techs I've ever worked with, and
Mm,
he was a tech for a lot of years when I was still in Florida, that was another fascinating conversation with me because I'm more often than not, I have zero experience behind the keys and zero experience in tech. So
mm,
my experience is on stage. So some of the things Charlie said were like, "Oh man, I wish I would have had more awareness of this at the time." So one of the things he said was, I'll paraphrase because I forget exactly, but was when I play the eagle noise, for example, from the booth,
mhm.
or something like that. I play a sound effect of that kind of nature that, yeah, that puts an animal or puts something else in your space. It's because I'm noticing that the scene has gotten stuck and it needs to move forward. It needs to move to a different place,
Yeah.
or it needs to do something. And I'm just trying to prod it, give it a little momentum, give it a little traction
Yep.
to get there. And that's the way that from the booth that he can do that. So what are those moments for you, and how do you as a musician prod the scene and get the scene some traction underneath it when the wheels are starting to spin?
I'm still trying to figure this out. And I actually feel like I do not have a very expansive toolkit for unsticking a scene. And it's something that I would like to get better at. Like if the scene does have a lot of momentum and there's a lot of energy in the scene, then I get really creative and I'm like, well, this is like starting to get really dramatic, so I'm going to help you be dramatic. But if it's kind of like less momentum, then I there isn't a ton that I feel super confident doing, because anything I do, I'll feel I don't know, like because of the nerves and momentum, like I don't like I'm less confident about everything I'm doing. So I'm like, I don't know if this is like what it needs. So I'm less likely to like jump in with something. And so maybe I should work on that. Like I like maybe I should actually get more confident about jumping in with like weird stuff if it doesn't feel like there's a lot there, because that's when it's the most needed and it might shock them into something. But I guess like there's certain musical cues that could feasibly happen in a movie or something that kind of leads the moment. So if it's like if people are talking and then like there's kind of like a bum bum, then that's like changing the emotion in a big way. And so maybe there are certain situations where playing that can get the characters to have a different perspective. Or sometimes quoting a real song in my underscoring can just like add a laugh to the scene, and that can kind of just add a little bit of extra energy that can people can play off of somehow. But other than that, I don't have a lot of great tools for that.
When you're talking about changing the perspective of one of the actors,
Mhm.
and initially, I think the first time you said it was in the context of maybe one of the long form kind of a shows, when you'll play something intentionally that doesn't match what the emotion was that
True, yeah.
when you do that, is that you being aware of the narrative of the entire piece and saying, I think this is where we need to go? Is it
Mhm.
you just being mischievous, or what's or are there times it's one and times it's the other, and when do you pull which lever?
For the most part, I kind of try to do stuff that's just kind of like a little hint about like what the character's thinking or like what the character is going to go into from there. So if it's, I'm not really trying to be like super counter to like what's happening, but it's just kind of like, I think a lot of good improv scenes will have kind of an emotional change. So it starts with like two characters fighting. At the end, they settle their disagreement and they kind of see each other's humanity, I guess. Like that's a one way it can end. And then another way is it can just like continue to escalate. And that's always really fun. But I think that like if I know what the beginning is and I'm like maybe there's a possible end to this that I can steer you to, then I'll try to do that. So if it's like maybe it's in that disagreement scene, then it's like actually this happened recently. I was in a rehearsal with a musical improv group where it was like these two like bitter rivals, like one was visiting the other in like prison or something. Like they were talking through the wall in prison, and then like they were talking, and then I like they were talking about how much they hate each other, but I started playing this like really sweet music under it. And I think I did because I thought I could potentially steer it to a like that emotional change, right? Where it was like, this might be more interesting if they start to kind of like decide that they like each other at the end. Maybe. So that was like my offer. But what ended up happening was they took that and kind of just like did this really funny musical number about how they kind of like are like romantically attracted to each other despite hating each other. And it became this like super wild like everyone, it was just a rehearsal, but everyone in the room was just dying laughing at that. So totally a good choice to try to sort of be a little bit of a juxtaposition emotionally, because it turned into even bigger juxtaposition and even bigger laughs.
Yeah. That's a huge part of comedy, I feel, is just, I mean, juxtaposition itself. That's why one-panel comics from Gary Larson and The Far Side work so well. It's just, it's just something.
Cow tools.
Yes, exactly. I guess this is kind of like the previous question, but how do you decide when and where to wield your power? Because I've done improv on stage where someone is playing the entire time, and I think in an effort to truly underscore and not overwhelm, it ended up being sort of sad. And then we could never overcome the sadness because that's what was being played, because I think they were trying to be quiet, but they played the entire time. And it's like, oh, we can't. Okay, we just can't. We can't get, this plane is never taking off because the RPMs are stuck at this low number. So how do you wield your power?
I've heard of this kind of thing happening with certain scenes and stuff. And I think that like what can happen is that like, I think that sometimes musicians can conflate volume with mood. Like that's how you get it. That's the trap that you might fall into if that's what's happening. Because I think that it's like sometimes it might feel like, oh, I'm trying to not overstate myself. But the only way that I can like intuitively think to do that is to play kind of like more like legato long notes or something. And that's like how I know to be kind of less stated. But then that actually is overstating a specific energy that is influencing the scene. And maybe that's not the energy you were going for. So I think the way to do that is learning like whimsical but low volume offers. And one thing that I will look to for that is like rom-coms and like TV show, like comedy TV sitcom kind of stuff. I think they're really good at that. I think there's a lot of like, if you imagine like maybe two characters having a funny conversation and there is some background music, but that's not the main focal point of it, then thinking about those soundtracks that are kind of just like boom, 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 but then like maybe with long gaps between the phrases, and then just you wait a little bit, they're still talking, and then maybe they start moving across the stage, and then you just do another like boom, boom, boom. So it's like you're not doing a lot, but it's just kind of like you're not bringing down the mood of the scene, but you're sort of giving it that like upbeat energy, but without drawing a lot of attention to yourself, I guess. So I guess playing with low volume and maybe adding a lot of space, but then like more staccato and major and bright is a combination that can help avoid that kind of like the pit of legato despair.
What is something that you wish new improvisers knew in terms of being a musician, what you can and can't do, and how you operate? New like on stage improvisers.
Well, I would say that like don't be afraid to give notes to the accompanist, because I feel like this is going to sound like a brag, but I'll immediately clarify it. I don't get a lot of notes, and that's not a brag, because I think people are just afraid to express, to try to distill like what they felt like they needed in the scene into like an actionable note. Like, I think people are just kind of confused, but like they're mystified by the act of like the technical mechanics of playing the instrument. And so if they're like, hey, like maybe there was an opportunity to do this kind of offer, like that never comes up, even though I think it totally should. I think people should totally be like, if someone's giving notes for an improv team, I really want to get the note of like, here's what opportunities you had and you maybe didn't see, or here is a choice that maybe didn't have the effect that you wanted. I personally, I'm super down to get like super vague, non-technical notes. Like, I don't know, like it just felt kind of dark, or like, I don't know, like it felt kind of slow. And then maybe I'll think about it and be like, well, no, I was actually playing it like a pretty medium tempo. So probably they meant something else. And like thinking and trying to translate is totally like part of the job. So like, I'm down to just kind of hear whatever people were thinking.
Yeah. So, Alex, when I was trying to give the Band of Brothers speech from Henry V, and you were just playing yakety sax underneath it, that was unhelpful.
Yeah, I kind of just felt like I was in the Benny Hill chase scene, and I really wanted it. It really took a lot of the wind out of my sails.
I kept looking for the topless women that were supposed to be chasing me, and they were not showing up.
Yeah, no one talks about that when they bring up Benny Hill. And that's probably good.
They only remember the song. They don't remember the misogynism.
Yeah, but that's a good point. Yakety sax does come up. Going back to real songs that come up, it's just like, I guess like in the accompanist world, it's fun to kind of like, I end up learning the names of songs that people kind of know in the zeitgeist, but don't never actually learn what they were from. So like yakety sax, like people kind of just know that that's a thing that happens when like chases are happening, maybe, but no one can really pinpoint where it came from necessarily, unless they actually like saw Benny Hill or kind of know all that stuff. So it's like it's fun to kind of go down the rabbit hole and being like, this came from this. And so like you secretly know like this is that song from this thing. And then like people culturally have like started to associate it with this. And yeah.
And it is just, I mean, it's a fun piece of music anyway, but I also may be conflating the chase scene there with the Monty Python sketch where the one guy's had to choose his way of dying and he chose to be chased off a cliff by topless women. So it may have been the Monty Python sketch and not Benny Hill I was thinking of just then. My apologies, Benny Hill.
Sorry, Benny Hill.
Yeah. But yeah, there's some, I mean, like circus music is gonna evoke circus circus things,
Yeah.
you know, all of that type of stuff. And I mean, as a musician, you wield a lot of power
Totally.
in that regard.
Yeah.
That's it for part 1 of my interview with Alex. Find him via the link in the show notes. If you can, bring him to you to teach your musicians best practices. Bring him and Phil to you to do a musical workshop for actors and musicians or to perform Grandpa Phil Does a Bedtime Musical. Wherever you are, go out and see some improv shows this week and come back for part 2 of my interview with Alex. Thanks for listening to Improv Autopsy.